Hello, I'm Locke Meredith. I'd like to invite you to join me on the next Legal Lines, where my guest is Colonel Rob Maness. Colonel Maness is considering running for the United States Senate in 2016. He ran in 2012, lost to Senator Bill Cassidy. He's considering running in the event our current Senator, David Vitter, wins the governorship. He's going to talk to us about 32 years in the military, the Air Force, being in the Pentagon when it was bombed, and what he would like to do if elected Senator. So join us on the next Legal Lines with Colonel Rob Maness. Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I'd like to invite you to join me on the next Legal Lines, where we're going to talk about the law and you and why it should matter to you what a law is. You know, in America, in our cities, in our states, in our federal governments, they all pass thousands, hundreds of thousands of laws, regulations every single year, and they either directly or indirectly affect you. That's why you need to know what a law is. It's an exercise of power over people, places, and things. So join us on the next Legal Lines, where knowledge is power. Hello, welcome to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith, and I'm very pleased to have on the show for the very first time Colonel Rob Maness. He's expressed interest in running for the United States Senate in the event current Senator David Vitter wins the governorship. Colonel, it's wonderful to meet you.
It's good to meet you. Thanks for having me.
And it's a pleasure to have you on the show and kind of tell folks about yourself and why you're interested in running for the Senate. So tell folks why you're running.
Well, Locke, I'm from Madisonville, Louisiana, and you know, at age 17, I enlisted in the U.S. Air Force. I've been following my mom and dad around in my dad's Air Force career.
I saw your dad was a master sergeant.
My dad was a master sergeant, and I enlisted myself at age 17, and been all over the world. Served for 32 years as an enlisted man and as a commissioned officer.
Explain the difference to folks.
An enlisted person comes into the service with a high school diploma or the equivalent right out of high school. And a commissioned officer is required to have a 4-year college degree and then compete to gain entrance into one of the service academies or to a officer's training course.
And so you played both roles.
So I played both roles later in my career as a lieutenant colonel and a full colonel, which is what I retired at. I commanded units. I commanded a B-1 bomber squadron and was privileged to lead the young men and women that operated those aircraft in war against the enemies of the United States.
You served overseas.
Absolutely. Led those folks in combat in the 9th Bomb Squadron. And then as a vice wing commander, I led air intelligence operations and was able to do the intelligence work that the folks, the troops on the ground and the air combatants that drop the bombs on the targets need in order to identify those targets.
And this service was in the Middle East?
Yes. Yeah.
So you have a keen knowledge about what's going on over there and the challenges we have right now.
Oh, absolutely. My Air Force experience extends beyond that. Obviously, I was a base commander, so I've run a 23,000 citizen sized city that covered 53,000 acres of ground out in New Mexico. It had its own electrical grid, its own school.
Literally a city.
Literally a city, its own police force of 600, and its own houses that required attention and decisions to be made.
Interesting. So practically speaking, not only do you have this military experience, but you have transitional experience to run a government.
Oh, absolutely. In my role out there, I was nicknamed the mayor of Kirtland Air Force Base, and I met with all of the local mayors once a month. We had a lunch, including the mayor of Albuquerque, which my base was right on the southeast corner of that city, and it's a 1 million-person city. So we had to coordinate our law enforcement and security and emergencies and those kinds of things all the time.
Was there a legislative branch, or committee or group of officers that kind of reported to you? How did that work?
Well, you know, many people misunderstand that they think a commander just gives commands and the orders are followed, right? Well, that's not exactly how things work. You have to lead people to, just like you do in civilian life, and you have to, get them to understand your vision of where you've got the organization going and what's the right thing to do for your citizens, because on that base we had families, we had over 100 organizations that we supported that were, many of them were not military organizations directly, but they were private. They were national security laboratories like Sandia National Labs. So we had to work with all of those folks, and we had several committees. One that, I chaired the Radiation Safety Committee because we had nuclear reactors on the base and nuclear material. I also chaired the safety committee for taking care of wildlife, because we had a wildlife conservation program on the base.
Very interesting.
And we coordinated with the local Native American population, the Pueblo Indians, because their traditional living grounds and burial grounds were partially on the installation. So we had a lot of things that we had to do from a legislative perspective and committee perspective in order to make the base operate like any other city would do in the United States of America, albeit with a little more security.
Well, like you followed in your father's footsteps, and I think you said 2 of your brothers maybe also. I understand you have 3 sons who are also in the military.
I have 3 sons that are in the military, a sailor, a soldier, and a brand new United States enlisted airman. We're very proud of the work that they've done. My oldest has also served in the Middle East several times. And we're grateful for his service, and grateful that the other 2 are serving, and hope that they will have a very fruitful career in service to their nation, just like I did.
Well, I want to, on behalf of, I'm sure, the entire audience, thank you and your children for your sacrifices in public service, literally putting your lives on the line. Thank you for doing that for me and my family and friends and loved ones.
Well, thank you very much. We appreciate that. And as my son that just entered the Air Force told me when I questioned him as to why do you want to do this, he said, well, Dad, somebody needs to do it. And you taught us that when something needs to be done, you can only count on ourselves to do it. And I want to do something bigger than myself.
Wow.
And
that's an amazing perspective to have.
We're very proud of them because we didn't recruit our children to go into the military, but we're proud that they were able to pick up that kind of ethical thinking.
Now I understand you and your wife Candy have been married for 17 years, and you have a young son.
Yeah, our youngest is 10 years old, about to turn 11. He's a special needs child, just finished 4th grade. We're very proud of him. He made the honor roll, the AP honor roll, and got Reader of the Year for his class. And
well, he's plowing ahead.
Well. Yeah, he's doing very well.
And then a daughter. 5 children total.
Our daughter, her and her husband, and my 2 young grandsons live in Iowa, and we have 5 children total.
And I understand you guys live in Madisonville, where you have a 250-acre farm, and then you also work as an executive for energy?
Well, when I first retired from the Air Force, the first 2 years I did work as an executive for Entergy, but we don't live on a farm in Madisonville. We live in a neighborhood in Madisonville just outside of town.
Okay, but you have a farm?
But I do have a 225-acre farm that my father-in-law farms. My wife grew up on a farm. He inherited some land from his dad and farmed for him, and I wanted to learn more about the farming business and find a good investment. So I have become a gentleman farmer, as my wife says, which means my father-in-law and brother-in-law
does all the work,
farm the ground and do all the work, and they let me come up and learn about things when I get the chance to.
Yeah, I've been there and done that. Yeah. Only I started when I was a kid at Hazelhurst, Mississippi, baling hay. It was a trip.
I've done some hay baling when I was a kid too.
Wonderful way to grow up.
Farmer, yeah.
Well, let's shift gears, because you spent your entire adult life in the military, decided to retire. What in the world made you want to run for United States Senator when you did against currently our Senator Bill Cassidy and the sitting senator at that time, Mary Landry? What caused you to want to run?
Well, think about what an oath of office is in the United States. And all officers in our country swear an oath to support and defend our founding legal document, the Constitution of the United States. Now, in my view, and the view of considerable others, career politicians weren't part of that process. And one of the reasons is we've developed this career track of professional politicians. And I believe that the results of that can be seen in the size of our government.
All right, we'll continue this on the next segment. This is Locke Meredith with my guest, Colonel Maness, talking about running for U.S. Senate. We'll be right back. Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I'd like to invite you to join me on the next Legal Lines, where we're going to talk about you and the law. You know, a law is nothing but an exercise of power over you, people, places, or things. But where does that power come from? Where does the government get that power? And how is that power exercised? And do you play a role at all? That's what you need to know. So join us on the next Legal Lines, where knowledge is power. Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith. Again, very pleased to have on the show for the first time Colonel Rob Maness. He's very interested in running for the U.S. Senate in the event current Senator David Vitter wins the governorship. Rob, let's talk about the fact that you ran for the Senate in 2011, 2012, and let's talk about the experience. You said you gave an oath when you joined the military, and it sounds like you want to take the same oath as a United States Senator.
Well, absolutely. You know, my three-word pitch was we want to ensure the liberty, prosperity, and the certainty of a strong America for America's future citizens, which includes my 10-year-old son and my grandchildren. And that oath and that Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, the values in the Declaration that underpin the Constitution are what has allowed this country to develop into what it is today, by and large. So in my view, what I saw coming into that race was a political career government, oversized bureaucracy, infringing on our personal liberties, keeping businesses from being as successful as they could be because of overregulation, right. And just an oversized bureaucracy. And as time goes on, we see that we have become even larger. Since President Obama's been in office, he's grown the bureaucracy several times over. And on the other hand, our security is uncertain. So that certainty that a strong America provides for not only our kids, but our allies around the world, and has for all of my lifetime, when my dad was serving and when I served during the Cold War, you remember, America's strength is what brought the Berlin Wall down.
Right. Without firing a gun.
Without firing a gun. But that strength only became available to us after we overcame the weakness that was created in the late 1970s from a previous administration after President Reagan got elected. Then he was able to strengthen us, and it was that strength that caused the Berlin Wall to fall without firing a shot. So our strength provides that certainty piece, that third word that I use. And you can see today that we're weaker than I've seen us in our lifetime. Our military is internally atrophying due to several reasons. One of those is the military budget sequester. But other parts of that are the social issues that are occurring inside the military, the attacks on religious freedom from outside the military, but within the government. Those kinds of issues continue to weaken us, and now we see we are challenged. We're challenged by China, we're challenged by Russia, and we're challenged by ISIS.
Yeah, we're going to talk about all of that, absolutely. Yeah. You know, what I find so fascinating is that you literally were in the Pentagon working in the military on 9/11. Explain to the folks what happened.
That's right. I was in 3C 918. That's the code for figuring out where you're at. What that means is I was on the third floor in the C ring between quarters 9 and 10, which is just a few feet from then Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld's office. That morning, we had, just like any other morning, went to work early, walked by the Pentagon Daycare Center as I was walking in from the North Parking Center, and the sky was blue. It was a beautiful day. It was a nice, crisp day for a September. Usually it's hot and muggy in September there, but it was a beautiful, crisp day. And I remember watching the kids go in and thinking what a great day they were going to have. But just a few hours later, we had seen that a civilian aircraft had been flown into one of the World Trade Center towers. Watched the other one happen when my attention was brought to it by a friend of mine that I was on the phone with.
So all antennas are up now.
Yeah. And you know, airplanes fly into buildings a lot around the world. Small airplanes do. And that's what he originally thought it was. And then he saw the second one impact. And
that wasn't a small airplane.
And I went to find a monitor, and it was 757.
And then the event at the Pentagon where literally the same thing happened.
And literally the same thing happened, but we didn't realize it was happening at the Pentagon right away, because the first reports that came in were that an airplane had crashed on the highway, because the aircraft was so low, and the highway was a highway called I-395, and that's the main north-south commuting corridor. Well, my wife worked at a building about 10 miles south of the Pentagon, so when I heard an airplane had crashed on the highway, by then we knew something was up. We weren't sure what it was, but that things were happening intentionally. So I called her office and got her on the phone, and I said, hey, I just heard an aircraft crashed on the highway, and she said, are you okay? They're telling us it hit the Pentagon, and as thinking back on it, the only thing that I really felt was like a whoosh in the air conditioning system when it went, because the building's entirely concrete and the way it's constructed. Even though I was just 100 feet or so from the Secretary of Defense, it knocked him out of his chair, but I was inside internally in the National Military Command Center. We didn't even feel it.
Well, clearly explains your focus on terror and kind of the military and the concerns that you have. And we'll address what you would do in the last segment. Well, let's talk about your experience here in Louisiana when you ran. I understand you went to every single parish, put 85,000 plus miles on the vehicle. Yeah. Tell me what you saw in Louisiana when you were meeting these folks.
You know, Louisiana is it's a really precious jewel that the United States has. There are more than 5 different cultures here, and I say that phrase carefully, more than, because even though I may think there are 5, I guarantee you I could go find some other group in a town or a parish that is out on its own.
Drive 50 miles and people
exactly right.
speak differently with Cajun accents or with, I call it New Orleans Yat accents.
And that's one of the most impressive things that I saw, was that although all those people are different, they're all focused on Louisiana, and they love their culture as part of this state that's just a state that, as we talked about earlier, has a main artery waterways and industrial traffic, and goods and cargo are going up and down our rivers and in and out of our ports all the time. We're providing the oil and gas to the United States of America, bringing prices down and creating jobs for people when we can do it, because you know, we have this overregulation issue that's causing business in the country to not be able to.
We're quite an economic engine if we're free.
We are an economic engine, and each one of these cultures has a role to play in that economic engine. And the industries like tourism, farming, the ag industry, the fracking industry, and the liquefied natural gas now exporting that we're about to
Sasol and Lake Charles.
Exactly, and oil and gas, and all of those industries are vital to not only our state, but they provide economic energy to our country. So it's just such a beautiful place that you can drive, like you said, 5 miles down the road, and you can see a whole new habitat for wildlife, or you may see an industrial area that's coexisting with wildlife, as opposed to what some folks outside the state might want you to believe, where you can't coexist. I've seen it.
Well, and ran.
That's an amazing thing.
Well, and a lot of people connected with you because you ran, ultimately lost to Senator Cassidy in the runoff between Mary Landry Cassidy and you, but you have 15% of the vote. And so we'll talk about that on the next segment. We'll be right back. This is Locke Meredith Legal Lines, Colonel Rob Maness, considering the U.S. Senate. We'll be right back. Hello, I'm Locke Meredith, and I'd like to invite you to join me on the next Legal Lines, where we're talking about the law and you. The law is nothing but an exercise of power by a government over you. But because our framers in our Constitution knew that power could be abused and corrupting, they chopped up power between the executive branch, the legislative branch, the judiciary, and you. So join us on the next Legal Lines, where knowledge is power. Welcome back to Legal Lines. I'm Locke Meredith, very pleased to have for the first time on the show Colonel Rob Maness. He's considering running for the U.S. Senate in the event our current U.S. Senator, David Vitter, wins the governorship. Colonel, let's dive back in. So you've talked about your own experience in the military that dealt with security needs and threats. And you actually experienced it at the Pentagon yourself, terrorism. And of course, that's a big issue that we face internationally right now in the Middle East and really all over the world with ISIS and Al-Qaeda and such. Explain to the folks how you would deal with this, and particularly kind of in the context of our options available, including energy production here.
Well, during my Senate campaign, Locke, we published a National Security for America in the 21st Century Plan. And the key piece to that national security doctrine is that you must have a foreign policy strategy and a national military strategy that are both coherent and interconnected and integrated with each other. And what we see happening around the world, for instance, with Russia, for instance, had we had exporting of liquefied natural gas up and running instead of being delayed in all of the permitting
Keystone
process
pipeline and all that
stuff, and had we had the Keystone up and running and being able to export oil and gas the way we should be able to, President Putin in Russia would never have tried to take the Crimea, let alone try to take Ukraine the way he's doing it now, because he wouldn't have been able to hold Europe or us hostage, because we would have entered that natural gas market and the Europeans would be able to have competitive pricing in a market that they could go to without it having to worry about
right
being cut
now,
out by Eastern Europe.
Right.
Exactly
right
right
now he's saying, you get all your gas or a whole lot of it from me. If you screw with me, I'm turning the spigot off.
Absolutely.
He wouldn't have had that power if we were also supplying gas to our European friends.
You're absolutely right. And the reason why on the oil side of it, the reason why I'm for an all of the above approach in oil and gas production is because on the oil side of it, if we were exporting and we were producing at what we were capable of, we wouldn't have to worry about ISIS in the Middle East or the Iranians in the Middle East trying to strangle the hold on Saudi Arabia and the Persian Gulf, because they wouldn't be able to do that to us.
Well, and as I understand it, if you put Iran and Iraqi oil production together, they're going to become number 2 or number 3 largest producer of oil in the world. And then if they're able to screw around with Saudi Arabia, who's the number 1 producer of oil in the world, and they limit the ability for that oil to get to Europe or to us or anywhere else, they can shut down the world.
So the last thing that we should be doing is completely withdrawing from Iraq like this president did without getting a status of forces agreement negotiated, weakening our best ally in the region from a military and a political perspective, Israel. We have decidedly taken a step-by-step approach to weakening them over time and continue to do so. And then weakening Saudi Arabia and Jordan, because those are our key friends and allies, or were, but our policies have actually set about to weakening all of those, trying to strengthen a relationship with a country like Iran, who has never done what they've said they would do in any case, whether it be their nuclear production or whether they wouldn't take action on some, you name the issue.
Well, they're supporting terrorist groups, Hamas and these other guys in Yemen right now.
Well, not just that, they're responsible for killing thousands of American soldiers in the Iraq War.
That's right.
And for us to try to establish a relationship at the cost of the relationship with the Israelis, the Saudi Arabians, the Jordanians, and the Turks, when we need that friendship and need those national security relationships, and most of all, need them to be active on the ground, at this time is just the wrong way to go, and it weakens that certainty. The certainty of a strong America for our children, the certainty of a strong America that creates peace in the world, and you see it happening daily. Now the ISIS folks they're able to commit their atrocities at will against, you name the group, whether it's Christians or other Muslims or atheists or homosexuals
and children.
It's
psychotic,
and it's cruel and inhumane what our policies have allowed to happen with the region.
Well, and we're talking about the Middle East and the chaotic, seeming contradictory policies we have in the Middle East, but this projection of what seems like weakness to the world has resulted. You talked about Russia going into and annexing Crimea, threatening Ukraine and other surrounding countries. And then we got China huffing and puffing and saying they're taking over their seas. This seems like a disaster.
It is a disaster in the making. It's almost like watching a train wreck happen as it happens. You see it happening, you want to do something about it, but you see that the momentum is so great and the machinery is so heavy that it's almost impossible to change it, but we still have an opportunity. We still have an opportunity this year and next year to vote folks into office that will take strong action, and not just on the military side or the national, because economics is as much an important integrated part of our national security, whether it's here at home or overseas as anywhere else. Don't we want the Chinese to be purchasers of our oil and gas because they need that energy? we want to have a good business relationship with them, because that does two things. Number one, it keeps us from aggressing against each other and keeps them from aggressing against their neighbors like they're doing now and challenging the freedom-loving people of the world, including the United States. But it puts them on a footing with us that we are sellers and buyers in the market. And that's why free market goals are so important, so that we have that type of relationship instead of this antagonistic relationship from a military and national security perspective.
Well, and
we can work together on it.
And it seems like we're talking about the weakness that we're projecting only manifesting itself in aggressive kind of militaristic positions taken by Russia and China and others. But there's also economic aggression. We seem economically weak or adverse to their positions, so they're literally going out and trying to create new groups and methods of trading with each other, leaving us out as the world reserve currency, leaving us out in the mix, period. And it's isolating us in ways that can be very harmful economically.
So economically and from a national security perspective, America is becoming isolated. That is the last position that our country needs to be in as we go into the rest of the 21st century.
So what is your position on immigration, and particularly our southern border?
Well, the first thing we've got to do is secure our border, secure our border, secure our border. That's my response to that. Until we do that, we can't address any of the other challenges. I do believe that our immigration numbers are too high for our economy right now. And as America's history has occurred, if you go back and research it, and our immigration policy has changed over time, depending on what's happening in the country, you can see our numbers have fluctuated so that we could keep up with those immigrants coming in.
So when our economy was down, we'd kind of shut off the immigrant spigot?
Right. We'd turn the spigot down.
And of course, that's where we are. Ultimate huge unemployment.
We're at the high, over 1 million a year, but we're at flatline from an economic perspective. So until that's fixed, we need to bring those numbers down, secure our southern border, make sure our northern border is secure, because we've had penetrations from enemies in the north in the last 10 years.
So it's not just economic reasons we should do this, but for security reasons.
And that's the second piece, and why I'm concerned about it is because we have a national security issue. And if we don't fix the southern border security problem, we are going to be penetrated by the enemies of America.
Colonel Rob Maness, thank you so much for doing the show.
Thank you, Locke. We
appreciate you being with us. This is Locke Meredith Legal Lines. Colonel Rob Maness, considering running for U.S. Senate. Thank you for being with us.